Hi fellow educators, I'm here in the studio with acclaimed film and TV composer Art Phillips. Art's screen credits and current projects speak for themselves, so we are here today to talk to Art not just about his industry achievements, but his work in educating the next generation of composers for film, TV and multimedia. So Art, you've been involved in commercial music production since before you came to Australia. What was your first experience composing and producing music to image in Australia or the United States?
Hi Phil, thank you very much for asking me here. This is absolutely an honor to be on your little program. Thank you. Really the answer to your question, I guess, is the first project that I scored original music to was later on in my career. I was probably, I suppose in my late 20s as opposed to it being the initial thing I did. And the first project I ever did was actually some underscore music to an old show called The Love Boat. And it's funny because when people hear that, they think, oh, we love the theme, you wrote the theme. I didn't write the theme, sorry, I didn't write that. I wished I would have written the theme, but I did some underscore music. But it was sort of a ghost writing situation that I was doing with a friend of mine that was the contractor at Paramount. And anyway, that's how all that happened. But it wasn't until even years after that, I would say about 6 years after that, that I actually sort of got my first real opportunity to co-write music for a daytime soap, and that was Santa Barbara, as you probably remember. I used to tell you about that show years ago, So that was my big soap opera claim to fame, which was very successful, and it actually still airs in a few countries, believe it or not, but that was then. We're talking, 80s something. We're talking 83, 84, 85, all the way through the early 90s. Anyway, that was that.
Oh, okay, well thanks for that. Yeah, I do remember you mentioning that, Art. But since you've been in Australia, and that's been a few years, you might remind me.
I moved here in 87, yeah, so it's been 22 years. Yeah.
Okay.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's gone quickly. Been a while, as we mentioned today, since I last saw you, and that was up in Queensland. But since you've been in Australia, you've seen the film and TV industry undergo a lot of change and growth. So what do you think are the best things about working in Australia as a composer for film and TV, and what things do you think could improve for the industry in Australia?
Well, the last part of the question I'll leave until last, I guess, because that's a really hard one. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, so it's a bit of a big one, isn't it?
Actually, I'm not sure I'm going to actually know the answer to that one, but the answer to the first part of the question really is, why I love living in Australia and working in Australia, and I think a lot of composers should realize this, is that the opportunities here in this country aren't as great as they are overseas, in the UK or the States for that matter. However, one of the things here is that you do get some really good opportunities because you're able to actually sort of be very diverse and do a lot of different styles and a lot of different type of projects without you being pigeonholed or stereotyped, I suppose. So, for example, we have the opportunity to do more television than anything here in this country as a screen composer, right? And then, of course, feature film, there's not as many feature films being shot here as opposed to LA. I mean, we probably only have 18 to 20, maybe 25 feature films done a year here in this country, as opposed to overseas. But here you're able to write for TV, you're able to write for film, you're able to write for advertising, which is a very lucrative way of actually trying to sustain yourself as a composer. You're able to do all sorts of multimedia stuff. Plus, you're still able to be a musician and remain, a well-established, player and an orchestrator and all this different, all these different things, as opposed to you being pigeonholed and stereotyped in LA, where you only get to do one style usually, because that's what you're known for, and you're stuck in that style. So that's why I actually like living here, because you're able to do all those different things. Plus, to be realistic, it's a survival thing too. You have to, because you can't survive in one genre here in this country.
I've got to agree with you there, Art. We have a lot of our senior students that do film and TV music as a topic for the HSC,
right.
And hopefully they'll be some of the people that might be seeing this interview. And I find as an educator, I have to explain it to them that they're not necessarily going to go and do a degree course in film and TV music and automatically get a job. That it's a hard road, and there's a lot of competition for those jobs. So that sort of leads me into a slightly different question. Okay, say you were advising some senior music students and they're very capable in their performance and their composition skills. Bit of a hard question, but what advice would you give them if they're really passionate about writing music to image?
I think it's a really easy question, and a lot of people laugh at this answer, but I really believe it. I mean, I'm probably old school when I say this, but I still think that it's really, really valid. I mean, if you look back at the early years of all the TV and film composers, we're talking the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, 50s, all that stuff. Those guys and gals, who were composers, weren't composers at first. What they were great musicians. And that's where I think a lot of things are lacking nowadays. I hate to say it. I mean, of course, I was the president of the Australian Guild of Screen Composers for 7 years. I'm not any longer. I'm retired. From that, I'm a special projects consultant for the Guild. But one of the things that I've said all along is that one of the things that I think everybody lacks nowadays is all of a sudden they come out of film school and they think, here I am, I'm a composer, and let me try and get a job, writing for TV. And it does happen. A lot of these people do get jobs doing that. But the problems that I think nowadays are that the composers don't have serious musicianship skills. And I think that is so, so important. That's how I started. My passion was only one passion, not a diverse passion. It was one passion for an era. And that era may have lasted for 4 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever it was. And my first passion was as a musician, to be a great guitarist and to really, really work out and woodshed all that stuff and work along the lines of a musician, and doing concerts, doing session work, playing live on the road with big acts, doing whatever, playing with orchestras, whatever it took to really get my skills together, to learn how to sight read and really play and to interact with other musicians. That's so important, because then once you get that happening, you can then understand much more about orchestration and arranging techniques and how textures work together and how moods can vary and how you actually encapsulate that mood with the sound of different instruments and the combination of instruments, and that's how you become a composer. It's all very well to learn the nuts and bolts of how composition works and all that stuff, but composition and screen composition is also a totally different ballgame. Screen composition is more minimalist in trying to serve the actual story and the script, as opposed to being there trying to create a great composition. What you're doing is creating a great sensation of music behind the textural script or the storyline. Those two totally different things.
That's gold, that response, so thanks for that. And this video is going to go up on a Music Educators Forum, and I can already hear the applause amongst the music teachers.
Laughs.
No, I don't think so. I think a lot of us have been feeling the same way for many years, particularly music educators who aren't themselves composers, but the syllabus and so forth requires us to teach elements of composition, and indeed for our students to produce compositions. And this actually changes the question I was going to ask, because you so comprehensively answered what I was going to ask you, that our students need to have those skills as performers and the music knowledge. That's I think a lot of people would agree we've lost sight of that a little bit. What do you think? I know that, look in this studio here around us, and the computer software and the equipment and so forth. Do you think that the rise in and use of music technology has hampered those skills in students?
I think it's twofold. There's pros and cons to it, as I've always probably said. The cons to it are that, unfortunately, throughout the years of technology, which is probably now a good 24 solid years that I remember, where technology really, really did come into play. I mean, the first Macintosh computer happened, as far as I remember, around 83, 84. Prior to that, there was the Commodore computer with software programs that people were able to record music, and from there, it's sort of gone, uphill. But it's gone downhill in terms of, unfortunately, we don't have the opportunity to employ musicians as much as we used to. Now, not just me or we, I mean the world, because what happens is that people are used to being able to go to one person nowadays to get a final result, and those final results throughout the last 2 or 3 decades have just been able to increase, by 100-fold in terms of the quality and the parameters that one is able to actually sort of capture a more realistic sound, So the negatives are that we, or me, the composer, are now sometimes forced by, for example, TV networks expect us to be able to do a series for a very, very low, inexpensive price or cost, right? And, we do that. And the reason we do that is because we can do that, The problem is we don't actually have the opportunity to do it the old-fashioned way, which was to have a live ensemble all the time. On film projects, of course, it's different. We do have that opportunity because there is a bigger budget and there's that opportunity for that scope of expansiveness. But usually, the deadlines for a TV series, we only have 4 or 5 days to score it and record it and deliver it. It's impossible to do it sometimes with a lot of live players. We need to have more time. So, therefore, technology has been, not 100% positive in terms of keeping the musicianship happening throughout the world in terms of employment of musicians, of interaction of musicians in the same room together, and all this. The positive parts of technology is that it actually does allow us to experiment a lot more and to do mock-up concepts or ideas or mock-up scores for a director, for example, for a film or a TV show, to hear what we want to do as the composer. Now, I'm hoping this is after we get the job, not as an audition to the job, because I think that's where it gets really, really scary and very, very negative, is that sometimes they expect us to do it for free because we're able to do it. We happen to have it. But what they forget is that, this costs a lot of money and a lot of years of experience, This isn't just something that you graduate from film school and all of a sudden you go out and spend 10 grand or 20 grand on it and all of a sudden you can do it. It doesn't work that way.
I think music students need to hear that, Art, that sometimes they think they get that latest bit of software or the Firewire mixing desk or something, and I think that's going to result in better quality. But I think, as you say, the experience and knowledge and skills to use that equipment, that software, how to use it is very important.
That's right. Which takes me back to one of the earlier comments that I actually made, is the fact that I instill so much with students, because I do lecture occasionally at various universities, is that, and I teach screen composition and orchestration, but I teach screen composition from the point of view that it's so important to learn the craft of orchestration and how to really work with musicians, and not just to write for the screen. That's like the third part of it. The first thing is get your musicianship together, get your orchestration skills together, understand how it works, and then you'll learn to be a composer. It's great to learn how to be a composer for the screen now, but really the best way is to be able to put all those things together and then become a composer.
So at the end of the day, you could probably summarise your advice to the next upcoming generation composers as practice, practice, practice.
And go out there and play, and go out there and woodshed it and play with as many people as you can, as many ensembles as you can, work with as many people as you can. That's how all the composers from the earlier era, which I'm sort of at the end of that earlier era, I hope, actually were able to get, our careers happening, is because, I used to work with the guys, for example, like the Jerry Goldsmiths, who were the composers, and I happened to be a session player that happened to be on one of the sessions maybe for a Goldsmith, and I learned, that's how, and I saw it being done, and that's how you learn how it really happens,
Well, Art, I could keep going with this all day, but on behalf of the teachers and the students that are going to see this, and I hope many of them do, thanks very much for your very, you're always so generous with your time and your vast experience. And I don't know that you realise just how helpful it is to the teachers and the students that I deal with to hear from someone in the field that does it. So thanks for that.
Thanks for the opportunity, Phil. All the best.